Bonjour, welcome to this another installment of the More Than Human Encounters series by Crosstalk. We have already done a video interview before in the past with Mihnea Tanasescu, our guest today. So we're not going to do a whole intricate, long introduction, but I just want to repeat that this particular video interview series is something that was come up with Crosstalk to kind of give you the opportunity, the audience, the opportunity to get to know some of the people that over the last few years have helped co-curate and moderate different installments of the More Than Human Encounters series. And today, again, we have invited Mihnea Tanasescu because the last time we spoke, you had just published a book.
Yep.
And that was really interesting. And now you published another book, so we were like, no, we're not done yet. We gotta talk to you again. How are you? And welcome back.
Yes, thank you. Good to see you again. Good. I mean, I'm happy. This one is out too. It doesn't often happen that you can celebrate sort of two books. But yeah, but there were different things that came to fruition at the same time. It weren't sort of, they have completely different trajectories. They're very different. So to me, it doesn't really feel that they came out in the same year somehow, because they're different.
They're very different.
They come from different places and different research. Yeah.
In fact, when I first read Understanding the Rights of Nature, I told you that I thought you were a lawyer. And now I read Ecocene Politics, and I'm like, oh no, the man is a philosopher. So you're very versatile. So it is a very different book indeed. I want to ask you also, like, it's my understanding that you've also acquired a new position at the university. I'm not even going to ask how you're doing all of that in 1 year, but what are you doing now?
I'm going to be a full-time researcher at the University of Mons, in the city of Mons in Belgium. And an associate researcher at the VUB still, but most of my activity will be in Mons from now on.
And teaching a course in Saint Louis?
Yeah, on environment and society.
Okay, well, busy man. Again, welcome back, and I want to talk about how, basically, last time when I was reading Understanding the Rights of Nature, I was, again, I wrote a little thing because I want to do this right. I was quite impressed. But with this book, Ecocene Politics, I'm even more impressed by the richness in diversity of your sources of inspiration, your intellectual creativity, and depth of embodied understanding, while all the while maintaining a commitment to accessible pedagogy. I want to thank you for having written this book, essentially, but we don't have a lot of time, so last time we were over the 20 minutes we got, but this time we're gonna do it right. So I'm gonna jump right in, okay? You start off your book, these are the first sentences of your book. Let there be no doubt, the tragedy has already happened. No matter how hard we try to wiggle our way out of so many ecological problems, the future is a matter of degrees of destabilizing change. There is no going back. No human society can still count on the future of their environment. Okay, that's a pretty hopeless start.
Well, I mean,
starting point.
You have to start with a bang. You know, there's some rhetorical part to it, but no, I mean it. I think that's true. And I think there's been a lot of writing and thinking, rightly so, about ecological crisis. I think that's a lot more present in people's lives. I think a lot of people knew it was coming, but it was easy to put it aside when you didn't feel it necessarily. And now, I think there's very few people left that don't have a lived experience of it, right? And so it's really come time to call things by their name and to say, you know, it is already here, it has already happened. And why I say it has already happened is because there is an inertia in ecological processes that takes them beyond sort of your ability to project, right? So this happened yesterday and we're living it today. So what's happening today, we're gonna live tomorrow, and so on and so forth. And I think we just have to start from that lucidity. There is no point in denying it.
I have to say that in the activism that I've done in the last few years and in the activist in organizing communities, I've been told often like we gotta bring a message of hope, or else people will not be able to be motivated, inspired to make the changes necessary. You start off your book with a takedown of hope. Could you perhaps sort of frame it for the potential reader why this is not a hopeful book? And what's wrong with hope?
Well, I mean, there's nothing wrong as such. I mean, you can, on a very basic level, it's hard to live without hope, right? So I don't have a problem with that. The problem I have is that several problems. That when you insist on hope, you tend to sort of minimize where we started, right? That this is already a situation of loss, of destabilizing change, of conditions that are less and less friendly to human life and to a lot of other creaturely life. So when sort of hope kind of lets you off the hook, right? It says, oh, but, right? Well, the but has to be here right now, is not somewhere in the future. So that's one problem I have. The other problem with hope is that it somehow, there's something about it that has this conceit that you can control what's coming, right? That somehow you have the ability to predict a place where if you just do the right thing, you'll get there, right? And in politics, there's sort of utopia, and I talk a lot about how you can't have an ecological politics that's utopian because ecology itself is not something that is predictable. You don't know where it goes. And lastly, I think the problem with hope is that when you lose hope, you despair, right? If you start without it, then there's no despair somehow. Yeah. So for me, those two things come together, right? And in fact, you see that cycle quite a lot, where people are hopeful about a particular outcome, they get frustrated, disappointed, and then they despair. And they lose hope in the negative sense of being hopeless, right? Yeah. Whereas what I'm saying is, let's start from the facts, be lucid about it, and try to resist projecting how this is actually a great opportunity and it's going to be fine, right? Yeah.
I have to say that I see a lot around my own personal circles of kinship and friendship. I see a lot of this phenomenon that has also been written about, more mainstream, about so-called climate depression or climate despair. And which is why I started handing out this book to people who may be feeling hopeless. I'm like, no, read. This is good. This is helpful. Again, let's get right into it. There's so much. This is such a rich manuscript. So I selected a few things that I think, for me, really helped me a lot, and I think also would be a great introduction for those of us who may be interested in reading this book. I want to talk about the title, Ecocene Politics, and specifically Ecocene. Yeah. You write that you don't find it useful to propose new terms for the sake of it, but this was a new term for me. I'd never seen it anywhere. I mean, I've heard of Anthropocene, Capitalocene, Plantation scene, all kinds of scenes.
There's a lot of scenes.
But Ecocene was new for me, and I think it would be helpful for interested people to kind of get a notion of what you mean. What does that mean, Ecocene, and why is it important as part of our political projects, our future or present political projects?
I mean, I'm a bit embarrassed to add another scene. Yeah. And I can't take credit for the name itself. I give credit to Rafi, who I took it from and took it in another direction. And there's other predecessors in design. Then I've recently become aware that other people have been using it. But one of the things I say in the book is that, none of it is new somehow. It's just a way of braiding it differently and opening different ways to think about what's at hand. So in that sense, did we need another scene? I don't know. But here it is, Ecocene. And the way I place it is particularly in relation to the Anthropocene. So just really quickly, the Anthropocene, anthropos refers to humans, Ecocene is a geological era. The Anthropocene is the era where human activity at the global level becomes like a geological force. So it changes the climate. Before this, it was volcanoes that changed the climate, right? It was glaciations, exactly. Like it was geology, right? That was in the driving seat, and now through collective human activity, we have the same effect as geological forces. So there's the Anthropocene. And on the one hand, I mean, that's become quite current, and on the one hand, it describes something that's real. It's like, yeah, absolutely. But here I'm trying to think about politics. And Anthropocene for me is a very good term in geology. It describes something in the abstract that is supposed to be done by a species, the human species, right? Which can be abstracted as an actor if we're talking about geology. But if we're talking about politics, it's not particularly useful because it lets a lot of people off the hook. Right? And that's a criticism that has been made over and over again, and all the other scenes that you mentioned make this point and take it to task for that and for other things. So why the eco-scene as opposed to the other ones?
The way you describe them are also kind of trying to figure out, because Anthropocene kind of lays the blame on everyone, so
right?
All of the human species, and when we talk about capitalist scene or plantation scene, it's more like looking for where the blame really actually is.
Exactly.
But
exactly.
You wanted to step away from all that.
Yeah, because those are fine, and you need to apportion responsibility, you need to point fingers. That's great, but there's nothing I can add there, right? And I wanted to look in a different direction, and the eco part gives it away. I wanted to look at what's happening as the age of ecology, as opposed to the age of humans. True, there's obviously there's a certain stirring of ecological processes through human activity. But in the end, ecological processes remain largely independent in their own dynamics. And we sort of have become omnipotent, but in a very ignorant way, right? We're just messing up things, but we don't at the same time develop an ability to understand how ecological systems work. So really the position we're in now is to try to understand the ecology in order to be able to create political thinking that is up to the task of an ecologically charged world, right? So I'm really trying to turn and look at the other side. And I think a lot of the terms that you mentioned sort of take the ecological for granted. They don't spend a lot of time thinking about what does ecology give to politics, It's used in a very abstract way as, nature out there. And just real quick, another thing with the Anthropocene that I think is problematic, and the Ecocene takes it the other way, is that the Anthropocene talks about the globe and the planet, right? And I think where ecology sort of focuses our gaze is on situations and on specifics. And I think that's really, really important and connects to the lack of hope thing.
What I find, so you talk about how this notion of an era of ecological processes erupting, you use the word eruption, but also somehow, I think, really changing our political and philosophical sort of situating of ourselves as able to control or predict the future as such. And you derive from that, not necessarily, like in your book, there's not a really big emphasis necessarily on understanding all ecological systems to the T and understanding all relationships in ecological systems and whatnot. But you focus on three things that you propose as what we can take from this Ecocene era as a guideline, perhaps, or as inspiration, or as touching stones for how we build our politics in a very large sense. The politics. We talk about chance, change, and locality. Do you want to talk to us a little bit more about it?
Sure. So basically, what I try to do is to think about the science of ecology in terms of what it can give us to think with for political and social thought, right? And of course, there is no monolithic science of ecology, right? So you can choose, there's systems ecology, there's functional ecology, there's all sorts of branches that are, I think, work better with the Anthropocene thing, right? But what I wanted to look at, and especially by going back to the foundations of ecology and to sort of the writings of naturalists that are based on field observation, right, and are not necessarily, grand systems, was to find concepts that can help us think this situation while being grounded in naturalist observation. And there's three things that I take from William Drury, was an ecologist, an American ecologist that happened to be a professor at my alma mater. I never had the pleasure of meeting him. He passed away before I was there, but that's how I came to know of his work. And he wrote this book, which is called Chance and Change, and it focuses on field observations and makes the point repeatedly that ecological arrangements are constantly changing. He describes it as a comfortable disequilibrium, right? So things more or less cohere, but disturbance is the norm. So he argues that equilibrium models are pretty useless because they just don't describe how things happen on a specific level. So that's the change part. The chance part comes with the disturbance, right? Because things happen. And he talks about how for any particular creature, it's as difficult as it is for us to predict their future because of chance events, right? And that's also part of ecology. And then locality, because all of these observations are done in particular situations. And it's only from there that you can sort of ground the more global thinking. But really, I think where we have to think is not necessarily at the local level, but at the level of locality. Where are we when we're thinking and acting?
I think these are in and of themselves extremely challenging concepts to, I mean, I can't see, just listening to you and reading it, like I just cannot imagine this specifically already finding rooting and applications in the kind of politics that we're used to right now, like politicians that talk about like, we can try this, but we don't know, and this only applies here, and we don't know whether anything is going to change, or at least built in this anticipation of change and this sort of adaptability to change. Your book is tons of things that I find already like quite, like I want it, but it feels like we're miles away from that. But because we're almost done, but before we go there, we finish off, I just want to talk a little bit about Gaia. And this is going to betray what my references are. I mean, when I think of Gaia, I always kind of saw it as this avatar / Pocahontas sort of entity that is all indeed over the globe and harmonious and in perfect balance. And I think I've seen also in a lot of the discourse of environmentalist discourse and conservationist discourse, this notion of like perfect balance that we need to find and that we can, the harmony that we can connect to. But in your book, you're like, no, that's not what Gaia, I'll read, I'll quote you real quick. You said the original, hold on, where did I write this? Where did I put this? Oh, on this side, sorry. Gaia is an old name, so old, in fact, that she's not a goddess, properly speaking, but a force from the time before the gods. As a force, she's portrayed by Hesiod as a figure of violence, genesis, and trickery. One that emerges in great outpourings of blood, steam, and terror. And when I see what's happening in the world right now, I'm like, yeah, that makes sense. That's Gaia.
Yeah, that actually is a quote from Bruno Latour, I'm pretty sure, that I use there. And indeed, I take the concept of Gaia in the way that he talks about it, and also particularly Isabel Stengers, who is the one that I take the eruption term from, right? And she talks about Gaia as a force that interrupts, that barges in, right? And again, that's the chance part of ecological processes, right? They happen to you, and they happen in unexpected ways. So Gaia is far from harmonious, far from in equilibrium. It's unpredictable, it's violent. It's always terrorized people. People have always been sort of subject to its whims, right? And I think we have to recapture some of that instead of sort of rooting ourselves in this fantasy of harmony, which just cannot exist. That's not what the world is made of. Yeah, but in terms of, just real quick about the politics part, it's miles away from this.
Let me give you an example of one of these.
Yeah, go ahead.
Like, I don't know if you've heard of this donut economy thing.
Yeah, donut
where
economics,
like these social engineers, I guess, have come together and kind of designed what I feel is like kind of like a balanced city, where like the city's metabolism, whether it's like social metabolism or industrial commercial metabolism, is kind of regulated as an ecosystem, where some things are used and then materials are recycled and upcycled, and it just seems like this donut, this perfect donut, and which is, I think, very much inspired by people wanting to be sustainable and ecological. Sure. And then I read you, and I'm like, wow, but where's the chance and change and locality here?
Well, it's just written out. I mean, that's a very nice fantasy, and that doesn't mean that there's nothing there to use. There's lots there, and that's part of the point I'm trying to make, is that there's no sort of requirements of being ideologically pure. You know, there's lots of ideas out there, and I think once we give up this idea of no, we have to get where I'm hoping to get, we can make alliances that right now we can't see. So I think that, you know, the perfect circular economy, et cetera, is by and large a fantasy, what you described. But it doesn't mean that there's not a lot there that we can use.
Yeah, I really want to encourage people to get this book, Ecocene Politics. There are a number of ways that you can do that. You can get it in hardcover, in print.
Yeah, you can do it paperback. It's open access online as well. You can download it from the publisher and all other open access platforms.
I mean, I don't want to necessarily like sort of pick and choose what I like best, but I honestly, what we just talked about, Gaia and terror, and how you know, humanity has over the sort of civilization as we know it, how we've tried to contain and sort of control nature to compensate for that terror that we have for it. The way you create avenues of opportunity when you write and think through vulnerability, relationality, a mutualism, as a starting point for sort of dealing, or a strategy for dealing with this terror. For me, that was very new and extremely informative and rich and inspiring. So for the reader, get into this. There's a lot more than that, but this was for me very like, Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anything you want to tell about your book? Maybe something that you really like.
Well, I think you've said it better than I can.
Okay, good. Thank you so much.
Nice.
And good luck with your next endeavors.
Thank you.